success versus fulfillment. I tell people success is easy. It doesn't mean it doesn't take hard work. You know that, and obviously people you've worked with and people I've worked with, know that as well.
Hey, Mark, how are you?
Good. How are you today?
Doing well. Doing well. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely
Yeah,
excited for the day.
me too, man. Me too. How's everything going by you this morning? Pretty good. Off to a good start.
Doing well. Very productive so far. So makes for a good Friday.
Good. I love that. You have a good, set routine for your mornings, or is it a little varied?
No, it's pretty. Yeah, it's pretty set. I have a routine that I do every single morning. So not just the production side, but really kind of some me time before I get into those things, so I can kind of focus on what's important for me.
I love that. That was actually one of the things that I implemented in my own life in this journey. That was one of the best things I've ever done. It seems
Okay.
really simple, but carving out some time for yourself first to really fill up your own cup.
Yeah.
I love that idea. What does that process look like for you in terms of what do you include in your me time?
Okay. Well, first for me is connecting with God. I spend some time in meditation and doing that, and reading, obviously. Then for me in the life mastery stuff that I do, I practice what I preach. So, I tell people if you start off the day reminding yourself of who you are, you'll see that guy show up during the day. And so for me,
Mm,
it's doing some of that, really kind of visualizing where I believe I'm called to have an impact throughout, all the areas of my life. Whatever kind of comes to mind that day, whatever I want to focus on that day. And then from there, it's doing some business production and, the nuts and bolts of making things happen, the
right.
boring, redundant work after that. But yeah, I always start off focused and then work on the work after that.
Mm. I love that. I love the thing I love most about that is you're really reminding yourself of who you are, right? And I think that's a really powerful thing. And I think there's also a lot of people who struggle with even knowing who they are in the first place,
Yeah.
right? Would you say that that's a real big stumbling point for people to figure out, hey, once you figure out who you are, it makes a lot of things after that so much easier?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jim. And I think for me, that was the whole journey when I was, growing up and into adulthood, trying to really kind of figure out how to make my mark, but really trying to figure out how to be a person of impact. For me, I tell people this: there's an impact in the world that has your name on it, and for me, it was understanding that, but really trying to find that validation and fulfillment through the things that I did, whether it was
Mm,
academics or athletics or entrepreneurship. I always had a business mindset, really wanted to be a creative person in that sense. Um, and then I got to the top of those mountains and found out the same insecurity, fear of failure, imposter syndrome that I was struggling with in the beginning. I still had at the end, but there was, a greater chance of failure, greater outcomes that come from that. So what I found was the things that I was using to try and show I had fulfillment, worth, and value didn't work. And unpacking that and being on a spiritual journey and personal development, all of those things, right? When you feel like you're more than the circumstance you're in, you're trying to find the answers somewhere to not just validate it, but for me, it's really to unleash that person. So long story short, it came down to really understanding that you're either living from who you're created to be or what your life has told you. Our experiences in
mm,
our past and those things that have told us things that have, you're struggling academically in school. I was one of those guys who was struggling academically. Well, there's an identity statement you can take from that, which is, I'm not as smart as everybody else. It comes easy for them, or they can be successful, or they can be whatever, famous, a business owner, what have you. But that, I guess, it's not for me. It's those things that you tell yourself from the circumstances you walk through. When I started to be able to unpack that and started to find out, no, my worth and value is something that is what I'll call it is innate. It's something that is part of who I am. You can't change the character of who you are. I mean, truly the sense of who you are. You can only hope to unleash it. And so in that place, identity started to become that key where when I understand who I am, that person, that man can live it out. When I don't, then my circumstances, my world, my job, my vocation, my marriage, they all have to make up the difference. And at the end, they'll never be fulfilling or satisfying.
mm. I love that. It reminds me a lot of even my own journey, and kind of when you talk about getting to the top of the mountain and realizing it's not what you expected it to be, because I had the very same experience.
Yeah.
And for the first 20, 30 years of my life, I really thought success was the money, the bank account, the
Yeah.
car, the house, that stuff, and that's what my identity was. Hey, I'm this guy who can go out and do those things, and that's what I believed of myself.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even this negative thing like, hey, I'm not smart. I looked at it as, hey, this is what my identity is. It's I am successful in terms of material things. And I
Yeah.
never stopped to think about, hey, what does it actually look like to truly be successful? And, making that switch and realizing, hey, this is who I really am. This is who I was created to be,
Yeah.
and removing the earthly definition of that and really going back to my creation of what was the purpose put in my heart that I was put on this earth to do, and then living that out every day. My experience has been so much more fulfilling than it ever was before. And as a
Yeah.
bonus, all those other things which I used to prioritize have actually even gotten better. Right, I have more successful businesses now than I did when that was the priority. And it really goes to show you how important it is to do what you're saying there, and really focus on finding out your authentic self and then living it. So I'm curious for you, did you have sort of that same experience? Like, what was the point in your life where you decided, hey, I'm not living as the authentic version of me, something has to change? What was the previous version of Mark like?
That's a great question, Jim. I first off, I want to highlight a couple of things you said because I think they're really profound, just in the words, because it's the same words that I use with people. But there's a difference between the two. Success is really me just outworking the next guy, working harder, longer, right? Being more diligent, putting more time in until I outwork the next person, have that success that I desire to have. And I've been there, and you illustrated it very well. But fulfillment to me is different. Fulfillment is not me being successful and marking that off. And it doesn't mean success doesn't happen, like you said. It can happen, but what is it? Is it a substitute for identity? Is it a proof of value? Or is it an outworking of who you're created to be? And that's what fulfillment is, I believe, is knowing that this is the me thing. There's an impact in the world, like I said, that has my name on it, and this is it. It's the thing I'm not just putting time into it, so I'm investing me into it. It's the thing that distracts me from other things. I think about it when I have quiet time. I have to be pulled away from it to do other things because this is my passion lived out, whatever that thing is for you. So I love what you said there. But back to your question of the moment or that time for me, it was in my mid 20s, late 20s actually. And growing up with a father I was trying to measure up to and using success in, those areas, academic, athletics, entrepreneurship to try and prove who I was, and finding that it was lacking. It was a different event actually. It wasn't anything to do with business or relationship, but my wife and I were expecting twins, and I lost them at 5.5 months of pregnancy.
Wow.
And it was the most challenging, most devastating time of my life. And I remember there was a drive that I was taking. So my wife and I, she was supposed to have a regular doctor appointment. They were just checking up, found something wrong, rushed her to the hospital. I met her there, and we lost our twins. Taking care of my wife, trying to make sure that she's okay, trying to deal with my own grief and broken heart, to be totally honest. We had an older daughter, and because it was supposed to be a regular appointment, she was expecting us home after work and all of these other things. Well, 1 hour goes into two, goes into three, goes into 9 o'clock at night, and we're not there. It was back in the day with pagers. And so she was paging me while I was in the middle of encouraging my wife to deliver our children who were going to die. And in that place, I wanted to make sure I couldn't tell her anything. So I was going to wait till everything was settled and then go home and tell her in person. It was on that driving home, that something broke and changed in me. Spiritually, there was a journey that I needed to have a conversation with God about. But emotionally, there was this thing that I was always trying to measure up to my dad, right? So that kind of tough as nails, nothing hurts, just get through it, suck it up, real men don't cry, all of that kind of stuff that I was trying to measure up to his version of what a man looked like, and trying to overcome it with academics, athletics, entrepreneurship, and all of that. And none of it mattered at the moment. There was a conversation I had with God that we don't need to go into, but there's a conversation I had with myself. It was this realization that I was trying to measure up to somebody that wasn't me, And in that place, it wasn't working. It didn't take the grief away. It didn't take the hurt away. It didn't change anything in my life. It didn't save my twins. It was something that was just dragging me down and exhausting me in the midst of it. And so in that place, something changed. I was really using personal development before that to try and find habits to change me into who I thought I was supposed to be and needed to be. And it was from that point moving forward that I went on a journey of trying to discover who I was created to be, trying to, that authentic, I love that word you said, authentic self, the person I was created to be, not what my life has told me, not what I was trying to measure up to, not the people around me who told me I needed to be something else. So in
Yeah.
that place, there was a brokenness in it. It worked its way out through a bunch of stuff. And, I created a course from that, a transformational course, I believe, Life Mastery, wrote the book, Life Mastery, Living Life by Design. But the pivotal moment was that moment when I stopped trying to measure up to somebody else's ideal of what it looked like to be a man and looked like to be me.
Yeah. That's an amazing story, and I can't even imagine the conversation you had to go home to have,
Yeah.
right? And I don't know if you could drive in the car long enough to mentally prepare to have that conversation, right? There are no real words to say, this is what happened, and try and explain it to a kid, let alone yourself, trying to even understand what happened there.
Yeah.
And I love how you said your first instinct in that moment was to have a conversation with God and to say, hey, obviously I don't know what your conversation was, but, I could tend to imagine it's sort of, hey, help me through this, right? To kind of, cast your worries and your fears to him and kind of let him put the words in your mouth, and realizing that, hey, you can't control this, no matter how hard you try, no matter how hard you work, no matter how much effort you put into it. There's nothing that you can do physically to change the circumstances, but just to be present in the moment and allow kind of him to work through you, I think says a lot. And it's a conversation that I believe a lot more men specifically need to have when we look at what it means to be a man, what it means to be a father. A lot of men in general, if we're going to talk men and fathers for a second here specifically,
Yeah.
have this perception that you need to not have emotion. You need to, be the hardest worker in the room. You need to do all these things that a quote unquote alpha male would do, but you can't show emotion, right? You can't show softness. You can't show that side of yourself. And I think that that's wrong. And,
Yeah.
I believe that we really need to have both sides of that equation, where we need to be able to show that softness. We need to be able to surrender. We need to be able to kind of allow God to play a more present role in our lives, where, I think these conversations are not happening enough. So I love how you
Yeah.
said that.
I appreciate it. And I'm just going to go there if I can, Jim. The conversation
Sure.
I had with God wasn't one of God, would you help me? But why did you do that? And if I could unpack that really quickly,
Yeah.
my vision and version of God was the same as my father. My father in our household was the disciplinarian. It was back in the day where maybe they do it today, but for sure in my house, my mom would say, when I acted up and got crazy as a young person, teenager, these words would come out of her mouth: wait till your father comes home. And I knew what that meant. That meant that, well, now I've crossed the line and I'm going to get punished. Back in the day, for me, it was physical punishment. It wasn't abuse. So don't, worry about me. But in that place, you knew that dad was a disciplinarian. If I did something wrong, he was going to be the one to punish me, and all of those things that came along with that. Well, it translated to a false understanding of my relationship with God as a father, in believing that he was just there to punish me and to see the things I did wrong, and I would have a consequence for that. And so it wasn't a relationship with a father who loved me. It was a disciplinarian who was looking for me to do something wrong so he could give me the punishment I deserved. And so in that place, it was falsely believing that my children were being punished for something I did wrong. My life wasn't perfect. It still isn't perfect. And in that place, there was this understanding of, you could have saved them, but you didn't. You gave them the consequence of the wrong that I did. And I actually turned my back on God and said, I'll never worship you. I'll never talk to you. I'll never go to church again. And I didn't for a short period of time. Don't have time to talk about the whole story, but today I'm actually a pastor, associate pastor in my church. And so that wasn't something that was a life altering move. It was a momentous moment in really starting to unpack what a relationship really looks like. It took time and over time. And the reason I wanted to tell that story is we look at our father, or my dad's name is John, was John, he passed in 2019. We look at them as a representation of God. And I believe that's on purpose, that there is an expectation from God that we are their first understanding of what it looks like to be cared for, to be nurtured, to be, disciplined, but also to be comforted and to be protected, right? And in those places, me as a father, the best thing I can do for my child is to try and adequately represent their father in heaven until I can hand them off in a relationship to him, meaning give them that relationship through the things I try and do to grow them. And in that place, and they naturally move towards their own relationship with him. The challenge with that a lot of times is our earthly father isn't perfect. My dad, John, wasn't. Did the best job he could for all he knew and the person he was. And I celebrate him for that. But there was those places where there were those holes in the relationship that, again, I looked at him as disciplinarian and somebody I had to measure up to, but never could. And I looked at God the same way. And so a lot of times our hindrance in that relationship is the relationship we had with our father. And so for me, a lot of that journey was unpacking all of that, working with the pain and grief and all the things of losing our children to begin with, but also starting to figure out there was still this thing inside this relationship that wasn't going to die. And he sent me lifelines of people in my life, a guy that would reach out to me every single week, tell me, hey, what's going on? God's not afraid of your anger. You can have a conversation with him. I would hate to have the conversation, but I'd still have the conversation with that guy every week. He was a lifeline given to me so that I wouldn't fall away too far until I could be healed. And I think that's for a lot of people, but I guess in the summary point I wanted to give is he's better than who your father is on earth, whatever their level of relationship has been. And many times it's starting to unpack that and maybe have some forgiveness and have some conversation to be able to have that righteous and right relationship with God that shows that you are in a relationship with a father who loves you. He's not just there as the person to discipline. He's the one to nurture and care and to take you through the hardest times of your life, even if you don't see him.
I love that. I love mostly how you used to talk about relationship, not religion, because I think that there's a really big difference there. For me as a kid, I had very similar, father-son relationship in terms of the disciplinarian style. And when I grew up, my church experience was, hey, you get dressed up nice, you go to church 9:00 every Sunday morning, you sit down in the pew and you shut your mouth and you don't move, you don't say a word, you get up, you sing, you sit down, and you leave.
Yeah.
And that to me was religion, and it sucked. It wasn't engaging. It wasn't like this thing where I felt like I was building a relationship. And it really took until only a few years ago where I really understood the difference between religion and relationship, where, you start to have that relationship with God where it's not, my friend Steve talks about it where he says, imagine a scenario where you're a 16, 17-year-old kid and you're driving your car and you get into a car accident. You've got two options to think in your head. Holy crap, my dad's going to kill me. Or I got to call my dad. He's going to know exactly what to do. Right. And you want the second one, right? You want that second one where it's like, hey, I know dad might be a little frustrated, but he's going to know exactly what to do. He's going to take care of me.
Yeah.
And, I think to your point, which I think is an awesome one I haven't really ever heard before, is that sort of our responsibility as dads here on earth right now is to give our children a living, breathing, walking example of what that relationship looks like.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really beautiful point.
Yeah. And so a lot of people want to engage in my course, Life Mastery, and read my book because they want to be better in their business. They want to understand their impact, what's the mark on the world that has my name on it. And in that place, they start to work on those things. But the truth of the matter is it's the person you become. And so what we've talked about is the person you're created to be versus what your life has told you. The challenge with what my life has told me is it affects relationships, it affects fathering, it affects my feeling of security and who I am and all those things. So when you start to unpack, back to identity, you start to understand the impact you're supposed to make in your relationship. I tell people this, that there's a reason why my wife and I are together. There's the value and the character and the worth and the integrity and the passion, all the things that I bring to the relationship. As a spiritual person, I believe that my wife is the person that was created for me and me for her. Well, in that place, the more I understand who I am, the more I'm not living from past relationships that failed or insecurities that I used to believe, but living from this place of knowing that I'm a person of impact, I'm a person of worth and value, then I can start to have those, share those things, invest those things in her and in our relationship. And also in that relationship, I don't require for her to make up the difference. When I was a
Right.
guy that was a young husband that was living in insecurity, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, right? You feel like you're a failure waiting to happen, whether it's imposter syndrome, fear of failure, whatever the thing is you're dealing with. There's this sense that I'm not good enough, I'm blowing it, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, I'm not being who I'm supposed to be. And in that place, the relationship has to be perfect to make up the difference, because when you're insecure, there can't be any fights, there can't be any challenges in the relationship. So what I tell people is that when I understand who I am, it gives my wife permission to be who she's created to be, not to make up the difference for my insecurity. And it's not that I tell her she can be that, it's that by not expecting that from her, I don't receive that back from her. And in that place, you can have an amazing relationship. And in that place, you could be the father that you're meant to be, not the tradition that was passed on to you.
Right. Yeah, I think it takes a lot of the pressure off the relationship, where you're really interpreting every action as, why are they doing this? Because I did X, Y, and Z. Or it's really, hey, they're just also living their same life, experiencing things for the first time, trying to figure themselves out. And not everything they do is related to you. I think a lot of times we look at it like, are they mad because of X, Y, and Z that I did? Right? Just like you had that conversation in the car.
Yeah.
Hey, why is it happening to me? It may not necessarily be your fault, right?
Right.
It's totally separate. And I think when we start to look at it as, hey, it's my fault, we get into this whole negative cycle that is really unproductive. And I
I
love
love
how you
that.
said it. It gives each of us permission to just be ourselves. And I think that's a beautiful place to have a relationship from, because there is no pressure to be perfect. There's no pressure to be 100%. Because look, you've been married for a pretty long time, I would assume at this point. It's messy, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to be perfect. As so much as there are amazing days, there are stresses. You have kids, you have school commitments, and the kids have relationship issues, and like there's life, and life can be messy sometimes.
Yeah.
And if you start to layer on the expectation of whatever possible expectation you could put on, hey, I need you to do the laundry, or you didn't do X, Y, and Z, or whatever the thing is, there are so many things that could death by 1,000 paper cuts if you let it,
Yeah.
right? But what you said there about just not having that expectation and allowing yourself to be your true self and supporting your wife for being her true self, I think encouraging them on that journey, right? Giving
Yeah.
them the space and grace to be who they are and let them figure it out too, because they're still figuring it out,
Yeah.
right? We got to give people that space and grace. I think is a great point.
Absolutely. I love how you said that, because a lot of times it's oh, she's disrespecting me or this or that or the other, right? There's a understanding that you're taking from it that may be coming from that place of hurt and pain or issues or your negative thought life or whatever. But I love what you said in that, because it gives them the space to be who they are, and it gives you the ability to give grace to, because you're not having to make me feel better about me.
Right.
Because I already know who I am. I tell people this, and it drives them crazy, I'm sure, but I say it often. I say my wife isn't a necessity in my life; she's a benefit. I am fully formed as who I am. I am fully complete as a man as I am. But my life has never been better since my wife's been in it. She makes my life better simply by being in relationship with me. But she's a benefit because I don't need her to feel confident in who I am. I love her compliments and the things she does to pat me on the back and to tell me, I'm great or good at something, right? I value those because I value the relationship and I want to have an impact where she appreciates it. But I don't need her to be good with me. And in that place, that gives me the opportunity to invest in her in ways. So I'm not asking so that I can receive, but I'm giving so that I
Right.
can love.
Mm. I think that's tremendously important. And I would imagine there's a good part of that that goes back to how we started this conversation in filling your own cup first, right? You start the day thanking God you're alive. You start the day thinking about, hey, how can I fill my own cup first? Making sure you're in a good spot, because then you are in a position to be able to give freely to other people because you've already had your cup filled right before you even interact with another person.
Yeah. No, I think that's great because our lives are loud, right? The
Yeah.
minute we walk off this conversation and I walk out the door, life is going to confront me there. And so I guess the question is, are you speaking to your life or is it speaking to you? And in that
Mhm.
place of the early morning and the meditation and the reminder of who I am, right? Affirmations, if you will. I start to remind myself so that I'm speaking to the day ahead. I'm not allowing the day to influence me just by being there and being loud in the conflict and issues and challenges that come up. Life happens to everybody. You can either focus on the life that's happening or being what is needed for the life that is about to happen.
Right. Well, I think it's a great point too, especially when you talk about living by design, not by default. Because if we rewind a bit, when we are kids, we have our parents in our house to help us say, hey, you got to go to school, you got to do your homework,
Yeah.
you got to do X, Y, and Z, right? And they are essentially programming our lives for us to help encourage us to do the next thing. And it's out of love, of course. But what happens is we then go through that phase and we start to become adults now, and we stop, uh, thinking. Well, I guess we never really even start thinking, "Hey, I'm now the one in control." We've spent so many years with this parental unit trying to help us again out of love, and I'm not saying they
Yeah.
shouldn't do it, but a lot of people forget that at a certain point you have to decide what you want to do, right? We just slip into the corporate world and now we have a
Yeah.
boss telling us what to do, and then the next thing you know, you're 50, 60, 70 years old and you haven't done anything. You've just done some stuff, but you have not done anything by design of yourself, right? You've
Yeah.
just repeated the same day over and over again and called it a life. Do you see that same sort of thing happening over and over again for people?
Yeah. And my book, Life Mastery, Living Life by Design, Not by Default, in the title, I try to give that concept that you're talking about. And it is that thing where, and it's not our fault, but I don't know anybody apart from a transformational journey that isn't living by default. And what I mean is that it is those things of people telling us what to do, but it's also the world telling us what matters. Which is why I chose the path of entrepreneurship, academics, athletics, right? The world says when I have those things, then I'm going to be somebody of value and worth. I'm going to feel fulfilled. I won't be insecure. I won't have fear. Man, my life is going to be amazing. And it's only the people, like you've talked about, and I've talked about for myself and really the clients I work with, it's only the people who have gotten there to that level of success and found out, wow, my external has changed, right? I've got more income, I've got a title, I've got whatever, a different zip code or what have you, but I haven't changed. I'm still struggling with fear. I'm still believing I'm not good enough, and whatever those things are. But from a spiritual perspective, there's this understanding that you're made by design, that it's not by accident, it's not random, it's an individual with a name that's been created for a purpose. I see it throughout all of the Word of God, through a multitude of people, and I see it in my own life and the people I work with as well. There's a purpose to your life, and what that means is that you were created by design for an impact. And a lot of times we're trying to have our lives fit into the model of what everybody else says or what Instagram or social media says. And so it's this default of, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do, or it's this mindset that, again, you're living from who you're created to be or what your life has told you. We give definitions to our life. We think to better ourselves, but really it's an identity statement I take from my past that creates my present and determines my future. So when in the
Mm.
past I felt like I was somebody, oh, you're just not as smart as everybody else. This math is becoming easy to them. You failed that course or you failed that test. You're just not as smart as everybody else around you. When I feel like that's an identity statement that I'm taking from there, I don't take the big chances in my life. I don't go for the big goals in my life. I deal with what I can control. And by
Yeah.
dealing with what I can control, only doing as much as I know all the answers to, I limit the future that I have. Like you said, 50, 60 years old, and you've never taken that big leap into your dreams because you were afraid of failing. So,
Right.
life by design is understanding, okay, if there's an impact in the world that has my name on it, if I'm the answer to the room I'm walking into, I'm not the question to be figured out, then the more I can unpack that. With me, it starts with a conversation with God. Even if you're not a spiritual person, I believe everybody has this innate feeling that there's more than where I'm at right now. So when you start to unpack that, start to understand who you are in that, you can live by design. The design that I use through the book and through my course is scripture. It's understanding that if I master my thoughts, I'll master my life. I can't become the person I'm created to be if I keep telling myself I'm the person that I'm not, that person of failure and not worth and no value. So if I can
Mm.
master my thoughts or my words or my actions, really that's our 3-step transformational strategy. I can master my life. So life by design is understanding, okay, well, there's a person I'm created to be and there's a life I'm created for. It's done intentionally, not accidentally. And it's reprogramming, changing things I'm using against myself, negative thought patterns, words that speak negativity to me, actions that I don't take that stop me, and changing them in a way that brings the results that I believe I'm created for, the outcomes that I'm supposed to have, and the impact I'm
Right.
supposed to be in the world.
Yeah. Because I mean, there is the power of life and death in the tongue, right? And people forget how important that really is, especially in the things that you tell yourself. You know, I look at my own kids, for example. I have two kids, a son and a daughter, who are very different, right? They've
Yeah.
got very different styles, they've got very different skill sets, and there is this natural desire to want to grade them on the same scale.
Mm.
Right? You look at them, and one of them, amazing at math, could do mental math like you couldn't believe.
Yeah.
The other one could not even come close. Okay, but
Yeah.
one amazing artist, the other one not so much. Right? So you talk about by design, not by default. For us, right, I look at it even as a parent, but this same thing could be true in any relationship. Rather than saying, hey, you're not good at math, why are we not focusing on, hey, you're amazing at art?
Yeah.
Let's encourage you to do that. Hey, is that your design? Maybe you're not designed to be amazing at math and your impact in life will be through your art.
Yeah.
Let's encourage you. Let's nurture your nature to be what you were born to be. And I think we have some responsibility to help identify what that is and encourage it. Not try and grade everyone on the same scale, but say, hey, what is that unique thing about you? Let's encourage you to be more of that.
Yeah.
And I started talking about this about my kids, but the truth is we could do that with each other right now. You and I could say, hey, you are an amazing transformational coach.
Yeah.
Obviously, at this point, you're pretty well aware of that, but you might not have heard that before, right? But if we show up in our relationships and say, hey, you are amazing at this.
Yeah.
First of all, a lot of people like to hear it because they need that pat on the back. They don't hear it enough. And that might also be the nudge that people need to really start pouring more energy into something that is truly a gift, a calling for them that they are just not sharing with the world because no one has encouraged them to do that.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's amazing encouragement to do that really by God-given design, not just by what the world tells you this is what you should be.
Yeah.
Love that.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Jim. And it does have an impact on people around you when you're able to do that. So, I mean, every lesson I have in my course and in my book starts with the scripture. And there's two that come to mind. Let the words of my mouth and meditations of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, my God. And the second one is, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And in both of them, there's an interesting thing. So I'll take the first one first. So let the words of my mouth and meditations of my heart. Typically, what we look at is outside of ourselves. So I need to have words that speak the goodness of God and the creation and people around us and all of that. And there's validity in that. And let the meditations of my heart, which is your thoughts, let the meditations of my heart be pleasing in your sight. So we think that we're supposed to align with all the things that God says about everything around us. What we neglect is to understand that it first starts with what he says about us. I
Mm-hmm.
can't live a greater life than I believe I'm created for. And if what I tell people is if your thoughts aren't aligned with who God created you to be, they're lying to you. And so a lot of times we want to look outside ourselves, and there is that blessing and that goodness that comes from investing those things in other people and speaking life into them and thinking good thoughts about them and seeing God's plan for them. Many times we'll do it for other people before we'll do it for ourselves. We neglect ourselves in trying to serve other people, and that leads to burnout, that leads to challenges and issues in your life. So what I tell people is, what about you first, right? It's the whole analogy of an airplane. When the oxygen goes out and the mask comes down, you're supposed to put it on you first and the others second. But in those places, we don't do that in our Christian walks. Many times I'm supposed to serve, 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 do. But are you serving you? Are you reminding you of who you are? As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. You'll never have a greater life than you believe you're created for. And you'll never fulfill the full impact that God has created you for if you keep telling yourself you're not good enough.
Mm.
So if I can align those thoughts with who I am, sidebar on that, Jim, as you already know, I'm sure, the more I can do it for myself, the more I can invest it in others. Because instead
Right.
of giving them nice platitudes, I'm actually starting to see in my children, wow, like you so accurately assessed about your own children. I see this in you. I tell people the best of parenting for me is telling my children who they are until they see it in themselves. And it's not from telling them, okay, you had a good grade. It's not celebrating the outcomes, but celebrating their character. And in that place, trying to invest it in them until they start to see, man, this is who I am. But also, I have those capabilities because I can do it to myself. I can see
Right.
in myself those things that I am. And it's, we think it's arrogance, but it's actually humility. Arrogance would me be telling myself something that God hasn't created me to be, limiting myself in ways that God's actually given me the ability to excel, but I keep telling myself I'm not good enough. That's what arrogance is. Arrogance, there's this false sense of humility that says I need to put myself down to elevate my God. And I've never seen that in the world where somebody puts down a piece of artwork to try and celebrate the artist. So why would we do that for our creators? So if you start with yourself, if you're able to do it with yourself, if you're able to model those things in yourself, you're able to more adequately and completely do it with those people that you care about.
Mm, that's such a good point. I haven't really heard it described as why would you criticize the art to celebrate the artist? That's a really great framework for that. And you're right. There are so many people who operate in such a negative space. And I think for a lot of people, it's because they're more comfortable failing because they're familiar with it.
Hmm.
Right? Unfortunately, we have to look at, for the person listening to this, right? If they haven't yet had that conversation and they're living this life of default, not design, and they're repeating the same day over and over again, and they tell themselves, "Oh, hey, it's okay. I'll accept the failure. I'm used to failing. I'm just not good enough, or I'm consistently doing X, Y, and Z."
Yeah.
I question, how do we break that habit, right? How do we break the mold of I'm not good enough? If that's a thing that, hey, now you're 40, 50 years old and you've spent your entire life believing this lie that you're not good enough, or whatever the thing is that you tell yourself,
Yeah.
is it a conversation you have with yourself? Is it getting around people? Like you said, you had a lifeline who spoke some life into you. I believe there's tremendous power in tribe. So what would be the best suggestion for someone who might be struggling with that right now, thinking, hey, I'm just not good enough, it's too late for me? Where does that person start? Because it's not too late, right? There's
Yeah.
always redemption, right? We talk about, you look in the Bible, how many times what has been set out for evil was turned around and used for good. Right? There are
Yeah.
so many examples of things that feel like a mess that turn into a message. Every person has that ability still, no matter how old you are.
Yeah.
But where does that person start making that shift?
Yeah. I love that. And to put a fine point on what you were talking about, if you look at the age of people of impact in the Word of God, the age range is pretty much any person who's alive, whether it's in their senior years like Moses or Caleb or other folks and individuals like that, or somebody young like David or Jesus or any of the other people. There's no expiration date for calling an impact. And so wherever you're at it, today's the great time to start. And so really to put a button on something else you said, we not only accept failure, we actually predict it by who we tell ourselves we are. You you'll never have a life that you don't expect to have. And so if you're expecting failure, you'll find ways to fail and ways to show that in any circumstance there's something negative that comes out of it, right? Your perspective
Yeah.
is your life. And so there's that thing. It's not that failure happens and, oh, I guess I'm going to deal with it. It's when you really start to understand how God created your brain and how you speak into existence the things that actually happen, you actually are predicting the failures that are happening in your life. You're expecting them to happen, and so they do. When you expect success, when you understand that you're a person of impact, those things happen as well. But what about me? Like you said, how do I overcome this thing? How do I move past this thing? The first thing you don't do is habit it away. I've tried that. And habits just lead you to having good habits, but still having to manage your negativity, your fault, your bad outcomes, your failures and all of that. It comes down to really understanding who you are. And again, it's who you're created to be versus what your life has told you. So for the people I work with, we start to unpack some of that with an I am statement. Everything we have starts with a foundation of identity. As a Christian, who did God create you to be? Who were you created to be? And what's the life you're created for? Well, it starts with created value and identity. And so what I tell them is create an I am statement, and it's apart from my past. It's not a litany of the things I've gone through or the life experiences I've had, hurts, wounds, issues, great times, bad times, and everything in between. And it's not your accomplishments. Again, I've been there and I know many people who have and have worked with them who success is what's going to make me matter. Success is going to be my identity. So it's not the accomplishments I've had. It's not the degrees on the wall. It's not the cars in the driveway. So if you take those two things aside, you look at the person in the mirror. Who's the person looking back at you? The empowering things, the passionate things, the valuable things, the character things, those things are who you are, not my past and not my accomplishments. So an I am statement is literally me saying, this is who I'm created to be. This is who he made me to be. For me, it would be I'm a person of passion and worth. I'm a person of great love and care for those that I am involved with. I help the downtrodden. I help those people who are in need. I focus diligently on the things that matter to me. I am diligent until the very end. I'm all black and white. And if I'm all in until everything's completed. I'm a good friend and a father who cares and a husband who invests in his wife. So those are some of the attributes of who I am. So create that I am statement. If you're a Christian, I think that conversation would be great to start with God. With me, it did, and I invite my the listeners here and the people I work with to do the same thing, which is start with conversation and simply say, God, who did you make me to be? It won't be the things you're not. It won't be the failures you've walked through. It won't be your accomplishments. It'll be character statements of this person looking back in the mirror. So there's that. And then there's a couple of other ones really quickly. I invite them to create a celebration list. And the celebration list isn't the things I've done that I really love. It's simply the answer to this question. What do you love about you? What do you love about you? Many times for the men that I work with, and that was challenging for me as well, is I could see the things I wasn't good at. I could give you a list of the things I need to be better at faster than I could give you a list of the things I loved about me. And what I tell the people who are Christians is this: before anything was an attribute of who you are, it was a thought in God's mind about you. There's nothing that's been made on accident. There's nothing that's been made arbitrarily. Everything you've had, your height, your humor, your eye color, the taste, the things you love, the things you're passionate about, the things you aren't passionate about, the things you're amazing at, the things you're horrible at, were first a thought of God. And so the more I can celebrate those things, the more I can see God in me, the more I can accurately understand who I'm created to be. And the third thing I invite them to do is to create an accomplishment list. And this is like what it is. It's an accomplishment list of things you've done. I've done 130, Jim. I only invite them to start with 20. But like I do, Jim, when I get to 25, 30, 50, 75, everything that's of any value to anybody else is off the table. So I'm getting to 75 and I'm saying things like I've owned 3 dogs, or I've had 5 cars, or I graduated junior high, all these little things that are just ordinary circumstances in our life that we've done, but we don't recognize them as an accomplishment. And the reason why I have them do that is many times we think that when I get that title, that role, I get that income level, then I'll be somebody of worth. Then I'll have accomplished something. And what I tell the people that I work with, it's that if you don't celebrate the simple accomplishments, the ordinary accomplishments, most of the times you won't get to the extraordinary ones. When you're waiting until you get to the top of the mountain before you celebrate the journey, you'll probably quit before you get there. But the other thing it does is subconsciously shows you to yourself, I accomplish things on a daily basis. There may be things I haven't done well. There may be mistakes I've made, but there are things I succeed at every single day of my life. And when I start to recognize that, I start to give myself grace for those times that I don't succeed, to know that that's not the title and that's not the identity of who I am. That's just something I've walked through. So yeah, it's the I am statement. Who are you? What do you love about you? Again, the artwork and the artist, by seeing the amazing attributes of the artwork, you celebrate the artist who makes it. And then the accomplishment list, you succeed on a daily basis. Just because you've had moments of failure, they're really moments of learning. It's not an identity statement of who you are.
I love that. I love that a lot. And it makes me think about the idea of putting candles on your own cake. Right. So you have this, no have cakes, right? You got to relate it back to birthday cake at some point. but talking about your accomplishments and like the things that you are proud of, and putting those candles in there and lighting them up, letting them shine. And I think that for us to be able to bring that light into our lives and realize how much light there really is if we start to look for it is amazing. The other thing that I think I would love to add on to kind of what you said there is, when you ask God who you are and right how you were designed to be, the thought that comes to mind is you'll never hear the voice of God if you've already decided what He's going to say.
That's
So
good.
just be willing to listen and not have this predetermined answer in your head, because God speaks to you more than you realize, and it might
Yeah.
it might be audible. It might just be in friends and lifelines and little signs along the way. But if you've already decided what the answer is going to be, you won't see them. So just be willing to accept that you're being spoken to, and start looking for those things and those little words and those little signs, and you'll start to pick up on them. And I think that's a really impactful thing when you start to realize just how special you actually were created to be, and just how special you are and how much of an impact that you can individually have. And I think sometimes we put this pressure on ourselves to be social media famous as the definition of impact, right? If I
Yeah.
don't get 5,000 likes and I don't get 1 million subscribers on YouTube, then I am not impactful. But you very well could have been designed to impact one person. And hey, if that's your calling, if that's your destiny, then so be it. Live that thing out. And that impact that you might have on one person may create a ripple effect that impacts millions. But if you don't live by design, right, like you say, and go first and walk out the design that was given to you, the gift that was given to you, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right. So even though you think that one person who may hear that might be impacted, that ripple effect is never going to start unless you do that thing first. So I love that encouragement. I think that the whole thing, from the I am statement to the celebration of your accomplishments, is really a beautiful thing that I think is simple. It's free. It's something that you could do, and I don't think you need to put pressure on it, right? It doesn't have to be this miraculous thing that you answer overnight and have to be presented in front of a classroom. But it could be this thought that you start to journal about and keep in the back of your mind, and start to really understand, hey, who are you?
Yeah.
And I believe the answer to that question will really change your life.
Yeah. I love that. And it'll develop over time. Really,
Yeah.
a lot of what we're doing is unlearning those things that have been lying to us. Like I said, your thoughts are either aligned with who God says you are, or they're lying to you. And in that place, when I start to get rid of the lies, start to see through those lies, I start to see what the truth is. There's the scripture that says that let the thoughts that I think are be aligned with who you are. It's understanding who you're created to be, and in that place, you can live that out. But when you continue to have lies that speak louder than the truth, then you're not able to do that.
Yeah. I love that. Can I ask you a favor?
Yeah,
Would you pray us out?
yeah, for sure. I'd love to.
All
Thanks
right.
for asking, Jim.
Let's do it. Thank you.
Father, I thank you for this. That you are amazing in everything. But what I love about you specifically, God, is that you continue to invite us to unravel and understand who we're created to be. In this relationship with you, you desire for us to have the lives that we walk through, and you never negate the experiences that we've had, but you invite us to not allow them to tell us who we are anymore. I pray, Father, for everybody listening to this, that they would hear your voice, as Jim said. I love what he said about when you already know the answer. What is your answer to them, who they were created to be? Would you speak to them the truth of their identity and the life that they're called to? Would you show them those areas that are standing in the way, those things that they've blamed themselves for that are not their fault, those things that they thought were the sum total of who they are, which were really just a moment in time, those identity statements that they've had that have stopped them from the life that you've called them to? Would you invite them deeper into a relationship, higher into value, and more understanding into who you've created them to be and the impact they're created to have in their families, in their job, their vocation, with their children, with their community, and those people around them? For every person who's listening, watching this, Lord God, would you show them that they matter? that first off, they matter to you and that they matter to those around them. Would you show them your delight, your love, your care? Would you heal what's hurt? Would you destroy every lie? And would you unleash them so the world is changed because they've lived? And would you be glorified and be receiving all of the glory for this in Jesus' name? Amen.
Amen. Mark, thank you. This has been truly an amazing conversation, and I am forever grateful for you spending this time here with us today. A tremendous honor to you for doing what you do. It changes more lives than you'll probably ever know, and I know you don't do it for your credit, but you do deserve to know how much of an impact it does make. So thank you for doing what you do.
My joy. I appreciate the conversation. It's been amazing, Jim.
Thank you.